everyone, it's Mrs. Love and welcome to history class. Today we are in Unit 11 and we are on our third lesson. We'll be covering Chapter 41 and beginning Chapter 42 in this lesson. So you're going to need your book or you're going to need the online book. Also, I want to let you know that I put in some instructions into the course materials that would help you if you're having trouble accessing that online book. If you get that error message that says you need a flash, I put the instructions in the course materials so you can go ahead and fix that if you need to. Okay, so today we're going to go back to talking about the Civil Rights Movement. We talked last time about John F. Kennedy being elected president, but we're going to talk about the Civil Rights Movement and how that's progressing during the 1960s. Some of the things that are important to remember are that the television coverage seems to be playing a part in the progression of the movement. We're going to learn about that. And then we're going to talk about a specific letter that Martin Luther King writes. And we're going to talk about the different groups of people who are fighting for equal rights and their ideas and their approach to having a success in that area. And finally, we're going to talk about what were the actual goals of that movement. So before we get into all that, I just want to remember what we talked about yesterday. And see if you can answer a few questions here. Who was the new president? What did he say he wanted to do? And what were his feelings about the civil rights movement? Okay, so let's jump into 1963. In 1963, the civil rights movement is up and in full force, especially in the southern states, mostly in the deep, deep South. And one of the things that's happening is that the television has now played an important role in reporting news events in the country, because now pretty much everybody owns a television. So the media coverage of the protests and the officials' responses to protests is beginning to get noticed because of the brutal way in which the protesters are being treated in the South. So we're going to talk in more detail about that here in just a minute. So one of the conversations that comes up among the leaders of the civil rights movement is, how about having a rally in our nation's capital? If we could get enough people to show up, we could really convince Congress that they need to make some changes in the laws. So the hope was that they could encourage people to come to the Washington, D.C. for this rally. But the question was, how many people would really show up? Because if they plan this big event and then nobody shows up, then that might kind of backfire. You see, the other thing is, people are starting to really get frustrated in the South because it had been 100 years since the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves. And things were still not that much different. I mean, they weren't slaves anymore, but black people are still treated like secondhand citizens in many places. And they just want fair treatment, and they want to be equal. So more and more leaders come and organize groups for demonstrations and protests. And their efforts and television takes their message into almost every home in the United States to make an impact on this movement. So if you take a look at some of these pictures here, these are pictures showing the protests and the kind of response they're getting from the police. In some places, they're putting fire hoses on the protesters to push them out. In some places, the police are beating them, and in some towns, they even come out with like small armies to threaten the protesters. So I think the idea here is to frighten them away. Because remember, the people who are against this movement, they don't want these laws to change. So they're fighting back just as much as the protesters are fighting for their equality. So one of the places where this becomes really kind of violent is in a place called Birmingham, Alabama. And in Birmingham, Alabama, there's a guy there named Eugene Bull Connor. And he is this real, like, sort of ruthless, angry guy, Southern guy. And he's really, really against integration. This says segregation. That's a mistake. That should be integration. So he's really against integration of blacks in the South. And he is so much against it that he is backed by the KKK, who is like, you know, this really horrible group of people who are violent, and they fight against the civil rights. Excuse me. And this guy, Eugene Connor, he is the police commissioner in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's this big bully, and he thinks that he can push all these protesters around, and, you know, pretty much he thinks he runs this town. So what happens is his stubborn, violent ways end up actually helping the movement, because his decisions and policies and actions end up getting him into trouble, and we'll learn about that a little bit later. Okay, so once this movement's happening, and all the TV people are coming to Birmingham because this is big news and they want people to see it on television. So more and more protests are going on, more demonstrating by African Americans, because all they want is an end to segregation. And now they thought, we need to go further than this. Why shouldn't we have the right to vote, just like every other American citizen? So they decide, we're going to start pushing for equality and the right to vote. All of their demonstrations are peaceful and nonviolent, but what happens is Bully Connor sends in the police, sends in the fire department with hoses, and starts pushing back the protesters and sort of like threatening them, trying to egg them on to fight. And when the protesters don't respond, they get frustrated, and they just start pulling people off the streets and putting them into jail. So one of the people who gets arrested in Birmingham is our friend Martin Luther King. And he gets put into jail. And while he's in jail, he's reading a newspaper. And in the newspaper is a statement written by these Alabama clergymen. They're like church people. And in that article that he reads, they are saying that his methods are not very good and unwise and untimely. They say he's an outsider coming to their town just trying to cause trouble. And he is just trying to get people to break the law. So Martin Luther King responds to this letter, this article, by writing a letter, and references things like the Bible and American history figures to respond to the arguments of these people. Okay, so what I want you guys to check out, you're going to probably need to pause the video here. I'm going to see if I can web tour this. So but the link for this, I would like you to pause the video and grab this link off of the document in lesson number 3 called video links, because I don't think it's going to work in the web tour. But what it is if you go through here, it shows you the letter that Martin Luther King wrote. And it's pretty lengthy, but it's if you just want to take a look at maybe just the first couple paragraphs and skim through it, you can see what a very thoughtful and intelligent and peaceful man that Martin Luther King was. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video and take a look at that. When you're done, you can come on back. All right, so that was the letter by Martin Luther King. Now the next thing I want you to watch, and this is kind of a silly explanation of it, but we're going to go ahead and watch this shmup video so we can find out more about the letter from jail. Go ahead and watch. Now, I don't know if this is going to work in the web tour on the recording. If it doesn't, if there's no sound, then you'll just need to pause the video, grab the link from the links document, and then watch it separately from this recording. You need to pause the video and watch the video separately. It will not work in the web tour. So let's continue on. So what does this all mean? Well, it turns out that Martin Luther King was thinking about a lot of things for a long time. And he didn't just show up to get out of doing his job or to come and cause trouble. He really had a plan, and he thought that his plan would work to help millions of people. So he used the opportunity by writing this letter to bring people outside of the South, sort of to bring them in and help them to understand what this movement was all about. And it was about many things. It was about this horrible racism that was going through our states in the South and through our government and in all of the public areas. And it explained why people were protesting and why people were breaking the law, because they wanted to get attention. But they really only wanted to get what they thought was right. Okay. So he expressed in his letter too how disappointed he was in these church people, because he didn't believe that they were really behaving the way people who said, claimed to be Christians would behave. So he was trying to be very calm and peaceful about his explanation. So pretty much here, I want you to just pause the video and read through this paragraph, and this is kind of a summary of what that letter is all about. Okay, so let's continue on. At the same time this is happening, there's a whole grouping of children and young high school and college students who decide that they want to join in this movement. So they want to help for their cause too. These are young African Americans, and they believe in the equality as well. So Martin Luther King finds this out later, and he encourages them to get involved. So students would come to protest and march, and they would have things called sit-ins, where they would just come into a place and just sit down, and they would refuse to leave. Many times they were then arrested and put into jail, even the children. And people who marched in the streets, even the children and the young people, they had dogs attack them. The police dogs were turned on them, fire hoses turned on them, and in a couple of places even bombs were set in the black communities. But still, more and more people came out and supported this movement, and more people around the rest of the country were seeing this play out on television. And here are just some pictures if you want to pause the video and take a look at them. Some of the children protesting and the sit-ins and the fire hoses and things like that. So pause and take a look. All right, so let's move on. A couple of groups that were important to this movement are listed here. The NAACP, we learned about them before. The SCLC and the SNCC. I want you to pause the video and read through this slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about the SNCC. Go ahead and read through the slide, and then grab the link for this slide from the list of video links and watch the video. Okay, so after seeing that video, you kind of get an idea of what the goals of the movement really were. All they wanted was to end segregation, desegregate public facilities, have equal rights and equal access, and to reverse the Jim Crow laws. All right, we're going to go to part 2 in a separate recording. You'll have to go back to